Greetings, fellow explorers! Welcome to this new series which I don't have a name for quite yet, but for the time being, let's call it something silly like hive minds. Because, you know, a bunch of you are gonna collectively agree on something in a vote. The topic of today's video is the best team skill in Bug Fables: The Everlasting Sapling. So what I did is I asked on my community tab exactly what you thought was the best team skill, and you went on and voted. And now, we're going to recap what you voted for to be the best team skill, from worst to best. I give my opinion, so on and so forth. Let us begin. So in 4th place with a measly 9% of the votes, we have Kabu and V's Fly Drop. How this move works is it takes Kabu and V's combined attack power, adds 4, and it's a single target ignoring all defense upon contact. Now personally, this would not be my 4th place pick. I actually am pretty fond of Fly Drop as an attack. First of all, there are many more enemies capable of being airborne than being underground, so this move in general has fantastic coverage. It may only hit once, but that one hit is meaty. And with how it treats defense, it's useful no matter if you're in hard mode or hardest mode too, since the universal boost to defense doesn't really affect this move at all. It's also the cheapest TP wise, costing only 6 to execute. It's also nice that your positioning for this move does not really matter as far as how much damage you do with it. So if say Leaf is in front, both V and Kabu would still do as much damage as normal. However, it does have its drawbacks. Because it's only available in Chapter 6, this very well may be the last team skill you pick up. Also, as strong as what it may be, V is actually plenty capable of doing lots of damage all on her own. The big difference is that playing that way, Kabu still has a turn to use for himself. All in all, I think it's a decent attack, though it's unfortunately the lowest ranking one on this list. Before we continue, just a quick note everybody. Polls on this series are open to requests, so feel welcome to comment down below if you have any requests you'd like to see later on this series. With that said, let's get back to the list. In 3rd place, with 17% of the votes, we have V and Leaf's Frost Relay. Leaf and V in that order alternate in attacking a single target. Their respective attack stats are unaffected by this move. And Leaf's attacks can even freeze. Now this is a placement I actually agree with. If you know how Frost Relay works, it can be a very powerful attack on a single target. A certifiable boss destroyer. However, this move does have a fair share of quirks. For starters, you have to know that either V or Leaf have to be in front to get the maximum possible damage out of this move. If neither of those two are in front, you very well could be spending 10 TP to do like 7 damage at most. And that's only if you know that failing the action command for this attack allows your final hit to do a little more damage. It also does not combo with charge very well at all. Attack up status though seems to work pretty well for it. I talked more about these various quirks in a previous video explaining attack and offense in Bug Fables. Check it out later, will ya? It also hurts that getting this move is actually pretty cryptic. You can snag it as early as Chapter 4 if you know how to get it, but the Tarantula Wizard isn't very clear about needing a Magic Ice, a Squash, and an Aphid do, so you're welcome. In case you're wondering, the Sandcastle can actually drop Magic Ice from enemies. You can also find Squash well before Chapter 6 thanks to the Bandit Hideout. All around, this move is rather unwieldy, but against the right bosses, it can be devastating to fight with. Just be aware that bosses with defense don't really care about this move very much, so try to debuff them first. In 2nd place, with 19% of the votes, is everyone's combined signature move, Frost Bowling. Leaf encases V in a bowling ball which Kabu smacks towards the enemy. The damage is calculated by taking all 3 of your bug's attack stats and adding them up together. Both the ball itself and the explosion can freeze. The explosion also hits all enemies underground too, within range. Just know that the front attack bonus is not applied. So what do I think? This move should switch places with Fly Drop. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Frost Bowling at all. First off, it uses all 3 of your bug's turns. And while it does decent damage to all enemies, that's really only a factor in the Cave of Trials, which in my opinion, is not much of a selling point. Honestly, using Leaf's Icefall works just fine. I guess it does benefit quite a bit from using Empower Plus or Charge Up Plus, but at that point, you're being extremely inefficient with your TP. And when it comes to bosses, there really are not very many great options to use this move against. It's kind of useful for some post-game fights like the Leaf Bug Ambush or the Mothfly Ambush, but I honestly cannot think of a single example of where this move would be good outside of those 2 fights. To be blunt, unless you're doing a challenge run where you can only use Frost Bowling, you have no reason to use this move. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad skill, but it just takes way too much setup to make it worthwhile to use in battle. And speaking personally, I want team skills to be able to do stuff that Ice Rain can't do. So that's just my opinion. Finally, in 1st place, with a whopping 55% of the votes, it's Leaf and Kabu's Frozen Drill. Leaf turns Kabu into an icicle, drilling under a target. The power of this move is dependent on the average of both Leaf and Kabu's attack stats, and the final hit can freeze. Y'all seem to really like this move, and you know what? I agree. Frozen Drill, just like Fly Drop, ignores all enemy defense when it's used against them. Except here, you get this move from leveling up, not from story progression. This is a big deal, because bosses like the Beast and Ultimax Tank can take pretty heavy damage from this one attack. And then higher difficulties, the fact that it ignores all defense makes it extremely helpful to have there. It also works better with higher attack stats on your bugs because each individual hit does more damage with higher attack. And if you're lucky, your target gets frozen solid, which is always a good thing. It's also the second cheapest of the team skills, costing only 8 TP, as opposed to Frost Bowling's 9 and Frost Relay's whopping 10. Honestly, the only drawback this move had is that it took so long to get good. Originally, this move only hit twice, not thrice, before you got to hit one more action command to freeze the target solid potentially. I guess it's also worth mentioning that this move can only hit enemies that are on the ground, not airborne. But from B33 onward, basically every boss you encounter is going to be on the ground anyway. And barring Frost Bowling, you're not going to use these team attacks on just enemies, you're going to use them on bosses. So yeah, just about everything is working in Frozen Drill's favor. It's a legitimately great team attack, and if push comes to shove, I'd totally use it if I had to. In fact, I did have to, and you can check that out in the video on the screen right now, where I did my questless hardest run in this game. Or even check out that video I mentioned earlier about the various attacks and offensive skills available to you in Bug Fables, right here.